Okay, I did my presentation on the expedition Lewis and Clark. Meriwether Lewis was born August 19, 1774, Alameda Country, Virginia. He died in Tennessee on October 11, 1809. He was educated at Washington and Lee University and soon became Thomas Jefferson's protege. Jefferson asked Lewis to become his private secretary in the election of 1800. The families of Lewis's dad and mom were both well known to Jefferson. William Clark was born August 1, 1770 in Caroline County, Virginia, and died September 1, 1838 in St. Louis, Missouri. Enlisting at 19 in 1794, Meriwether Lewis served in Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Ohio. He first served in the militia and then to the U.S. Army. During this time, he met and befriended one of his commanding officers, William Clark. What started it all? In 1803, Thomas Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase, which stretched out from the west of the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. However, Jefferson didn't really know what he exactly bought. He only knew that this could mean a bigger westward expansion for the Americas. So on January 18, 1803, President Jefferson sent a confidential letter to Congress asking for $2,500 to fund an expedition to the Pacific Ocean. He hoped to establish trade with the Native American people of the West and find a water route to the Pacific called the Northwest Passage. Jefferson also was fascinated by the prospects of what could be learned about the geography of the West and the lives and languages of the Native Americans. Jefferson asked Lewis to command the expedition, and Lewis wrote a letter to Clark asking Clark to share the command. Thomas Jefferson later called this expedition the Corps of Discovery. The mission was to observe, collect, document, and classify, and to open up diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Indians. The journey, Lewis and Clark began their expedition at St. Louis and headed up the Missouri River, crossed over the Rocky Mountains, and continued on to the Pacific Ocean at Fort Clasp. The Corps of Discovery consisted of about 40 members. The Corps started their journey in May 1804 and returned in September of 1806. This is the route of the Corps of Discovery. Along the way, they discovered many animals, plants, and landscapes not indigenous to the Eastern America. Lewis and Clark navigated their way through the unfamiliar land with the use of compasses, sextants, maps, and the stars to guide their way. With the use of these tools and their own observations, Lewis and Clark created many maps illustrating the land in which they were traveling. Perhaps their most valuable guide was a Native American woman of the Shoshone Nation by the name of Sacagawea. Sacagawea became a vital member of the Corps of Discovery when her husband Toussaint Charbon, a French-Canadian trapper and trader, joined the expedition in 1805, when it passed through what is now North Dakota. She was only a teenager, 6 months pregnant, and yet courageously served as an interpreter as well as a guide for the Corps. Although the expedition was not successful with the finding of the Northwest Passage, they did make success with the start of a bigger westward expansion. The encounter with the Indians. The Mandan and the Hitsat Indians, who lived nearby their camp during the first winter of the expedition, gave Lewis and Clark a great deal of information about the land, rivers, and people to the west. When Lewis and Clark hired Sacagawea as an interpreter, Lewis and Clark promised the Shoshone tribe that future traders would bring guns and other trade goods because the Spanish would not trade them guns. Sacagawea, who had been kidnapped from the Shoshone several years earlier, recognized their chief, Kamawat, as her long-lost brother. An earlier winter in the Bitterroot Mountains made the expedition's trip extremely difficult. The Nez Perce offered food to the expedition. Their chief, Twisted Here, drew a map of the rivers toward the west. The Indians taught the expedition to make the dugout canoes for the next leg of their journey on the Columbian River system. The Nez Perce agreed to keep peace in the region if Lewis and Clark would help them get guns and other trade goods. In return, the Indians agreed to care for the expedition's horses over the winter. After the expedition. Upon returning from the expedition, Lewis and Clark were treated like heroes. In 1806, Jefferson appointed Lewis governor of the Louisiana Territory. Taking up his post nearly 2 years later, Lewis faced challenges and almost immediately. Personality conflicts, political differences, and questions about the appropriation of government funds all contributed to the difficulties. Hoping to resolve the financial questions, Lewis set out for Washington, D.C. in late 1809. The melancholy Lewis experienced throughout his life reappeared to such an extent that his traveling companions were worried about Lewis's safety. On October 11, 1809, Lewis died in his lodgings in Tennessee. Although questions remain, it is generally believed that he died at his own hand. After Lewis's death, Clark completed the work of the expedition by helping to prepare the journals for publication. They were published to the public July 1811. In addition to fathering 7 children, William Clark temporarily cared for Sacagawea's son, Jean Baptiste, after her death. Clark's fair diplomatic relations with the American Indians during his years as a Brigadier General Militia, Superintendent of the Indian Affairs of Upper Louisiana Territory, and Governor of the Missouri Territory. And here are some of my pictures from the St. Louis Museum in St. Charles. There's a statue of Lewis and Clark and their Newfoundland dog, Seaman. And then those are some artifacts. And the picture on the far right are like a picture of the compasses. And actually, I think it was William Clark's razor that he used on the trip and a pair of glasses. And then there's some more artifacts to deal with Sacagawea. And then there was also a boat and a huge map outside that showed the route. And that's it.